6:40 on your Monday, and that means it's time to sit down with our San Antonio Mayor, Gina Ortiz Jones. Mayor Jones, thanks for being here.
Good morning, ladies.
Yeah, thank you for being here. First things first, we want to talk about kind of everything that happened last week on Friday. 4 city council members, they came and challenged your push to overhaul the process of advancing those policy proposals or CCRs. Talk to us a little bit about what's going on there, because they're saying, everything was set in place. You agreed to a timeline of, leaving some of those, but now that's reversing, and they just want to make sure that a vote comes on whether or not that's going to change or not.
Yeah, so let me just correct some of that phrasing. So I think what's really important is that this council be afforded the opportunity to make sure that the will of this council is reflected in what we work on. And so what I have shared with my colleagues is if there's old things that you were working on, just like in the House of Representatives or in the State House, if at the end of the term and those ideas haven't gotten across the finish line, well then the next term you've got to restart it, right? And get the support of these members. And so what I have said actually though as a compromise is, hey, for those of you that have worked on things, so some of these ideas, like the support of them is from people, like the majority of the support is from people that are no longer on the council. So give the opportunity to those currently serving members to say, you know what, I still support that. And then once it reflects the will of this council, we can take it forward. And we can look at the work that's already been done on it and account, hey, does this need to go straight to a vote? Does this still need to be worked on? I think last week's, frankly, kerfuffle, if you will, with the abandonment bill, the animal abandonment bill, I mean, that exactly shows you why we need to do our due diligence on these. ACS, animal control issues, are one of the things that I hear the most about. And now folks were hearing after that passed that, wait, so if somebody leaves their animal in their house and abandons them, that bill, that thing, that CCR, that idea that you all passed, it actually doesn't change anything. And so again, some folks, we've got to focus on what actually works, not as just going to make somebody feel good. Yeah. Okay. So I would love to though talk about one of the main things we spent much more important time on, which was the flood projects. Visiting
that was our next question for you. Yes.
As we know, flood projects and the damage relates to the recent flooding. It continues to be a major issue in our community. Yeah. In our city, we have 14 major projects that are on the state's flood plan. Those are significant in total, as currently scoped. If we wanted to pay for all of those, that's $411 million. Wow. We haven't gotten any help at this point from the state or from the federal government. And so this, though, is a public safety issue. It's an economic issue. I went to go see these sites myself, put eyes on them myself. And in some of them, they're more complicated. You frankly have to move the road back. In other places, no kidding, it's major construction issues. And I was thankful that some of the council members whose these districts belong to came with me in there. But this is important because we'll address some of the flooding issues in our current budget, and that will finalize here shortly. The vast majority of those will have to be done via bond. And as you have heard me share, our bond capacity, which is kind of like our credit card, right? The limit for that is much, much lower than what we were expecting. Yeah. Traditionally, we would have thought that bond would be $1.9 billion if you were looking at historically what it was. The reality, the fiscal reality, is it is only $500. That is significantly
And that's
lower.
What I was going to ask you. Well, you've toured each of these sites, and I'm curious, you've talked to a lot of people that have been advocating for this. They've been demanding change. Yeah. Then we see 13 of our San Antonio fellow neighbors die in that tragedy. So what is the reality in getting that funding? I mean, I know that you have been pushing for state and federal funding as well.
Well, I think the reality is we're probably going to have to pay for a lot of this ourselves, which is why I go back to the bond and how we pay for this. The bond, though, as I mentioned, that's 500. It's the capacity for the next one is only 500 million. The total for those 14 projects, as currently scoped, and that may change, but it's $411 million. Wow. So why do I say that's important? Because we only do that infrastructure bond every 5 years, and as you can see, if we did all those flood projects, that 500 goes pretty quickly. Yeah. The other thing, though, as we're kind of top of mind here for that bond, we're supposed to pay for some of the downtown development related around the arena and all the other downtown revitalization out of that same bond. When they talked about this a couple of months ago, that first price tag for that first infrastructure bond for downtown is $220 to $250 million. So if we did all the flood projects and we did 220, we're already at 660. What did I tell you our credit card limit was? 500. right? So we've got to take some real due diligence here. What can we pay for in light of, to your point, what are people demanding? They want us to fix this flood infrastructure.
And a lot of critics against Project Marvel have advocated for that.
Before we get to that, though, there was a review being conducted as a result of those 13 live laws.
Yeah.
Where are we at with that? It's been 3 months. You went to visit those sites. Talk to us a little bit about that.
So those are two unrelated things. Okay. So
yeah,
the report,
absolutely.
Yeah.
But
So
we
the
need
report.
to know what that report says.
And that's what I'm going to share with you. So the report is due to just the June 12th flooding.
Yeah.
It did not look at the 14 projects. Just to be clear there. And so the final report is due 1 November.
1 November. Okay, we'll definitely keep up with that. But in regards to the budget, you talked a lot about projects. What about public safety? A lot of people want to know what's going on with the budget and public safety. There's a vote on this budget coming up this week. Anything you can share?
Yeah, well, I think we're going to look through our budget amendments. There's the budget that the staff has proposed, and now, frankly, based on the interest of the council and making sure that we're investing appropriately across the board, that'll be the discussion that happens this week. I think what's really important is, this council, though some of them have served previously, it's been a very long time since the council has created a budget in a time of deficit, right? So normally it's like, hey, we've got extra money. Where do we put it? That is not where we are. That is not where we are. We've got to make sure that we close the gap, because as you've heard me share, the real challenge, how can we help ourselves for 27? Because that gap in 27 is 150 million. So how can we help ourselves now to close the gap that we had in 26, then to work to close the gap in 27? Because again, top of mind for me, if we don't help ourselves long term, that gap grows to $220 million in 2030. So we have to make smart investments, to your point, but also when we've got opportunities like the Spurs Arena or some other things, and we have opportunities like revenue sharing. Again, that's why I'm so fixated on making sure, how can we help ourselves through that deal? One of those the naming rights, the company who puts their name on the side of the arena, that's one of the most lucrative aspects of any of those deals. That's normally 10 million-ish. So what I have asked for, and will continue to ask for, is can we get a cut of that so that can go straight into our general fund, help us pay for these COPs, help us pay for these senior centers, help us pay for some of these other projects.
But are there any specific projects with policing or fire that you can tell us about that they're wanting to implement or that you're wanting to see implemented?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, the police have, their staffing levels, right, are reflective of what they understand to be their workload. And so Chief McManus will say, this is what we're asking for based on workload. So you and I both know if you want to help somebody, how decrease their workload, right? And that's why we've also got to be, I think, thoughtful about other investments that are also that also impact our public safety. So, for example, I was just at a budget town hall in District 5, and interestingly enough, when people say public safety, they're not always talking about police officers. So there was a young man at that District 5 budget hall that said, if you really want to help us here, make sure you've got good programming at Parks and Rec. Yeah. Right, that's what the young folks want. If you want them to not be on the streets doing things that are unproductive, make sure they've got something at Parks and Rec to do that is productive. And so I think, for when you talk about public safety in each of the council districts, it's a little bit different. And I think we've got to be smart about how we also implement those things. I mean, we had a great briefing from also Ms. White with the planning division that talked about how we do some of our own planning in the city as a means to, as a way rather to prevent crime. Right. So there's other investments that we could also be making. So I think it's important we have these thoughtful discussions, but also understand our fiscal reality.
Sounds great.
Mayor, we're almost out of time, but real quick, I know that you've been visiting different districts and visiting with neighbors there. When is your next one, real quick? And that you'll be there so neighbors can come out?
Yeah, so our next one is early October. I think we're finalizing which district that'll be in, but our last one was just in District 3, and that was a great one, and I always enjoy doing these alongside the council member who's there. So appreciate that. Yeah, thanks you.
Thanks for being here this morning. We'll see you again next Monday and talk to you more about that budget.
Thank you.
All
Take care.